We're going to start with the shooting of two National Guardsmen just blocks from the White House in what officials are now calling a brazen targeted attack. This morning, we learned the names of the victims, 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom and 24-year-old Andrew Wolf. Both remain in critical condition and both have undergone surgery. And at this hour, the lone suspect in that attack, a 29-year-old Afghan national who officials say served alongside the CIA in Kandahar, remains hospitalized after being shot by responding officers. Authorities say the suspect lived in Washington state and drove across the country to commit this attack. And this morning, U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said the suspect faces 3 counts of assault with intent to kill while armed. Although a motive is still unknown, both Pirro and FBI Director Kash Patel have laid the blame squarely at the feet of the Biden administration, who they suggest did not vet the suspect.
We should not have to live in fear in the nation's capital, especially by one who came here from a foreign country. Through a process that was so absurd that he came through and released into this country, as many were, knowing virtually nothing about his vetting.
You miss all the signs when you do absolutely zero vetting. And that's exactly what happened in this case. When you, in the prior administration, made the decision to allow thousands of people into this country without doing a single piece of background checking or vetting, that's how you miss every single sign.
There are people outside of the Trump administration pushing back on those claims, but Pirro and Patel's remarks mirror the president's, who last night called for a re-examination of all Afghan nationals who entered the U.S. through a Biden-era program designed to help Afghans who assisted U.S. forces after the chaotic withdrawal from Kabul. Joining us now, MS Now national security reporter David Rode, MS Now reporter in D.C. Ariel Hickson, former FBI supervisor Ron D'Amico, and former FBI counterterrorism official Chris O'Leary. Both Rob and Chris are MS Now national security and intelligence analysts. Ariel, let's start with you on this. That briefing just happening today. We're not even 24 hours in. What did we learn from that briefing?
So we learned more details about the suspect. He is a 29-year-old Afghan national, and we actually reached out to Metropolitan Police Department to find out where he is in custody. There's still no details at this moment, but we learned more details about the moments before the shooting happened, how he is based out of Washington, Washington state, and drove across the country in his own car, armed, came to Washington, D.C., and then shot those 2 National Guardsmen in what has been described as a targeted and brazen attack. Right now, all eyes are on the investigation at this point, which the FBI Director, Kash Patel, is calling a coast-to-coast investigation. It started in his home in Washington, where they investigated or interviewed all individuals who lived there, and then they looked into electronic devices from those individuals, which led to another investigation in San Diego. That's why they're calling it coast to coast, and is also giving more insight as to whether they're going to look internationally moving forward.
What are you hearing? Americans very concerned about the victims here, Ariel. Sarah Beckstrom, Andrew Wolf. What's the status?
Right now, the status of those victims, they are in critical condition at this point. We heard from the presser this morning that they had surgery, they underwent surgery, and they're still in critical condition. One is 24, the other one is 20. And at this point, there are so many individuals that are pulling out condolences for those families who are quite devastated on this Thanksgiving Day. And of course, there is a push moving forward from the president to deploy more National Guard troops here, at least 500 moving forward. We're looking for a timeline as to when that might happen, especially given the security regarding that attack that happened just yesterday. Right. We are still waiting to get some more details at this point.
And David, yesterday, as Ariel was saying, that's 20 hours ago, 22 hours ago since this happened. We're not even 24 hours into this. When you were listening to the briefing earlier from the U.S. Attorney as well as the FBI Director, what did they not say that you were watching in terms of the scenarios that might be considered right now?
They don't know the motive. They might have found it already. They've conducted searches. They're looking at his electronics, his communications. But this was an intentional and sort of brutal attack. One detail they mentioned was that he comes around the corner, fires on them. He hits one of the National Guard members and then fires at them a second time.
Yeah.
and then fires at the second one. And it's strange. What we found out about his background today is that he was in this elite unit. It was controlled by the CIA, called a Zero Unit in Afghanistan. To get in that unit, he was vetted very carefully because they carried out night raids. They would try to go capture or kill Taliban commanders. And so any Afghan leaking a plan for a raid would put CIA officers and U.S. Special Forces in danger. And so he comes to the United States in 2021. There is more vetting than Kash Patel said. That's false. All the Afghans, and it's a large number, it's 70,000 to 100,000, came to the U.S. They first went to foreign military bases, were vetted there, biometrics, FBI, people looked into them, but it was a large number of people. What happened between 2021 and 2025 that would make him so determined to drive across the country, see military uniformed American service members, and shoot them and try to kill them?
You try to dig into the narrative, don't you, to try to understand why this happened. We don't know the answer right now. One of them that you've brought up in your coverage today, radicalization. One of the things that also came to mind is, what was his family situation? Many of them have been separated from their families for years in some cases, all that's leading into mental health, mental illness, probabilities of radicalization. What do you know about any one of those pieces?
So radicalization is possible. There was a case last year of 2 Afghans who also came in the same evacuation program in Oklahoma that planned an attack on Election Day in 2024. Luckily, I think a local member of the community informed the FBI. They were able to make arrests and stop that attack in Oklahoma. An NBC News reporter spoke to a family member of Lakan Wall, and he was with his family, it sounds like, and he may have had 5 children living in Bellingham, working in the area. But we don't know what happened and caused him to do this, whether it's mental health or ISIS radicalization.
Chris, what piece of evidence are you watching and you wish you had to understand more about why and how this happened?
Well, I think what David highlighted, the vetting for this individual and anybody who was in a unit like his, extremely heavily vetted. So the intelligence community has a ton of information on his background and his family and his network. I will tell you, without going into details of the unit or anything that's being reported, that organization and the CIA had their affairs in order during the evacuation. When there was chaos across the rest of the interagency trying to get people vetted and evacuated, the CIA actually had everything pre-planned and had a very orderly withdrawal. And when those individuals from that specific unit that's being reported were brought here to the United States, that information was shared with the FBI. So the FBI would know about this person in their holdings as well, not as a threat, but because he was a partner to U.S. forces for a number of years and the intelligence community. So you can rule that out, that he wasn't properly vetted. A large majority of the others you can certainly point to because it was haphazard, it was chaotic. There was interagency friction, there was compartmentalized databases, all of which made it very difficult. So the idea of going back and rescreening some of these folks, not a terrible idea. But for this individual, that is not the issue. But it brings you to, what's the motivation? What's the ideology? Was he frustrated over his last 4 years here in the United States? Did he have PTSD because he was involved in some of the most forward-leaning, special operations type missions in Afghanistan, while U.S. intelligence community forces? Did he have a mental break? Or is he self-radicalized? Did he all of a sudden gravitate to an ideology like ISIS-K or Al-Qaeda? There's a variety of things, push-pull factors that could get him to where he's at. None of them are excusable, but the FBI is going to really try to understand that and also trying to make sure that he was acting alone and not directed. Are there any overseas communications that suggest that this was a directed act? And if so, we will likely see, a claim of responsibility from ISIS-K or from Al-Qaeda here very soon.
Rob, a lot to build on here. You've worked with the Afghan groups who worked with and for the CIA before. Reflect on those experiences and what that might mean to try to understand what has been said so far.
Yeah, we worked with all different kind of Afghan units. When I was embedded with the special ops, especially the tier ones, sometimes you would go out and you would meet them, a unit that actually wasn't a vetted unit, and you would do a compound raid next to them. And because you didn't know, you weren't exactly sure, so you always kept an eye out for them. But then there were the ones that were, vetted, like the CIA units that we used to work with. And they would load up weapons and grenades and just be right next to you. And there was no question about it. The CIA had one of the deepest vetting processes out there. And there's obvious reasons why. So it's one of those things that, like, again, Chris and Dave said, this is the ones that were coming over. These were probably the most vetted, as opposed to some of the other ones in the haphazard way that they pulled out. And Afghan people were brought over by vet units. Veterans groups were so proactive bringing these folks over because they fought alongside. I've known Afghans that have lost limbs in operations I was on and killed, and family members. So it's one of those things that it's really tough to look at, because I know how much harder now it is going to be for Afghans to come over here. But as Chris said, we do probably need to that came in this way, but this just wasn't one of them. So again, the FBI has to start with a blank sheet and then start painting the picture from the facts that they find out in the investigation. What radicalized this guy? Was he a long-term plant? It could be, but more likely something happened between the time he came over and his drive here, because to drive across country and do this, there's a lot behind it.
Rob, stay with us, of course, on this topic, and putting on your FBI supervisor hat here. This is a holiday. Unfortunately, we do see spikes of violence during these times. Unfortunately, as I was just saying, what might you be looking for if you're with the FBI right now in terms of copycats of what might be more violence against the National Guard that are now serving in various parts of the country?
We see this, I think, with all kinds of shootings, political shootings, school shootings. And it's not, I don't want to say copycat, because if you're not thinking of doing something and you see this and say, wait, I want to do this, it's more people that were thinking of doing something and they see an event and they like the results. They like the press that this person's getting. They like the fear that it's driving. And then they start decide to act on it. I don't think you weren't thinking about this and then see it and want to do it. But now all the people that were thinking about something see this, they like the results, either it's the press or it's the fear that are putting out there, and then they start to really take actionable things to do something violent. So I think you have to watch out for it. I think the National Guard's members that are out there in the communities really have to look out, because they're in uniform. They're very much visible to the people. They're not. And someone coming up with a gun is not someone that you're looking for all the time. So they're very vigilant, and they have to be careful. Everyone across the country that's serving right now.
Ariel, back to you. President Trump, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, they're saying more troops are coming to D.C., about 500. What could we expect? What are they thinking about doing this weekend?
So there's still more details that need to be ironed out with the timeline as to when they're going to push to have those troops here. We know that this idea of having more troops here in D.C., at least 500 of them, is to make the area, quote unquote, safe and secure. But we've reached out to the White House. We still haven't gotten the timeline on that. And as of now, I could even say, looking around at this location, the scene of the crime, I have not seen one National Guardsman here today. There's been much less of a police presence from yesterday, when this was a real ongoing investigation right behind me. So I expect that we're going to be waiting to hear more details from the White House to get an idea of how that's going to look, especially following the attacks that happened to those two National Guardsmen from West Virginia.